Hello friends, welcome back to the next lecture on public transportation. So far in the previous lectures you have been introduced to the basic concepts in public transportation, and now we are going to look specifically at one of the modes of public transportation, which is bus transportation. So, in this lecture we are going to cover what are the different advantages and disadvantages of bus transportation. Then we are going to look at the different types of buses, different types of bus networks, types of bus stops, where they should be placed and how they should be designed. So, all of this put together would be very helpful in understanding how bus transportation system should be planned. So, let us get started. Now, there are some inherent advantages of bus transportation based on previous experiences in different cities of the world as well as in India. The most advantage with bus transportation is that they can operate on existing road system. So, you do not need to build new infrastructure, or you do not need to put in any new facilities in order to start a bus system. So, in order to operate a new bus system or to expand a new bus system, you do not need to put new roads, no rails, no overhead electric wires or anything of that sort, which may be needed for other types of public transportation. So, that is the very big advantage that bus transportation has. Now, there are other advantages as well. The routes can be easily modified. It could be rerouted based on newer developments that are coming up. So, for example, you have an existing bus route line or a bus route, but a new residential development comes up. You can easily extend that line to that new residential area. You do not need a whole lot of infrastructure to put in order to extend it. So, the next advantage is the schedules can be varied. So, you can have multiple schedules. You can during the day, during the month, during the year, you can have varied schedules as well. Then the other advantage is when the entire fleet is not required to run on a bus route or on a bus network, you can charter those buses. So, you can utilize your fleet in different manners. So, so that they are not laying unutilized and they are not generating any revenue. So, they can be used for charter services and relatively less demand, relatively a lower amount of demand usually suffices for dispatching a new bus service. For example, only a 20 to 25 number of passengers is sufficient per hour in order to justify a new bus. So, whereas the other larger public transportation systems require a higher demand or a greater demand just in order to justify a new system. So, bus transportation has these advantages. At the same time, it has several disadvantages as well. One is because they run on existing routes or existing roads, they are susceptible to delays. So, they are susceptible to delays not for their inherent reasons, but for reasons of other modes of transportation that are running on the roads. Then it is also a less visible route network because it runs on existing infrastructure or on existing roads. It gets hidden amongst all the other traffic, and you usually it is not very conspicuous. So, you will see many cities painting their buses a certain color so as to make them stand out in the traffic. Otherwise, they kind of blend in and you cannot easily spot the bus that you want to get on. The other big disadvantage, which is more to do with the perception of the people, is that people feel that bus transportation is less comfortable. So, they always have this feeling in their mind that it will be crowded, you won't find a seat, the infrastructure may not be of highest quality. So, this perception is something that is associated with bus transportation. And also for standard buses, sometimes what happens is if you do not have high capacity buses, then they do tend to get overcrowded, and the capacity usually cannot be easily added on because you need the fleet size is almost many times constant. So, those were the advantages and some disadvantages of bus transportation. Now, you need to know what are the different types of buses, because for a particular route or for a particular network, you need to run only those type of buses that will cater to the demand on that route. So, you do not need to run high volume, high capacity buses on routes that have very few people who use them. Similarly, or alternately, you should not have low capacity buses such as mini buses on routes that have high demand. So, once you are aware of what are the different types of buses, this will help you plan accordingly. Usually, you will see there are conventional buses, 40-foot buses, then there are what are called articulated buses or bi-articulated buses, mini buses and double decker buses, which are now limited in some number of cities in India and also across the world. This gives you a kind of an example of how many passengers can travel sitting and standing in each of these buses. So, you would see a conventional bus has anywhere between 35 to 54 seats. It can accommodate, or it should accommodate, 19 to 40 people. So, a total of 45 to 94 people can be accommodated in a standard bus. So, this is the general practice that should be followed. Now, it is not to say that any of the buses in India carry more than this or less than this, but this is what we generally recommend, or is generally noted when it comes to different capacities for different buses. This takes into account the revenues that are generated. This takes into account the comfort of the people that are riding those buses and some other factors. So, this is a general guideline. Now, you see articulated buses can take many more people. Similarly, double decker buses can accommodate many more people, but they have their own issues, such as articulated buses require a very large turning radius. So, they may not be able to get into the narrower streets, urban streets in your residential areas, so on and so forth. Here are some pictures of different types of buses that I was discussing. A conventional bus, double decker bus, articulated and bi-articulated buses are something new that are coming up in some of the cities which are heavily investing in improving their bus transportation systems. After you are aware of the types of buses, now you should be learning more about the different types of bus networks. So, when you visit a different or a new city the next time, try to get hold of a public transportation bus network map, or maybe even look up on the internet to see how the bus network is, or the transport network is, public transportation network is. You would see that there are different types of patterns of these transportation systems or bus transportation systems. Listed here are few of them that are mostly used worldwide: radial and ring patterns, grid type network, radial crisscross, trunk line with feeders, time transfer networks, branches and loops, and through routing. So, there is enough material in the textbooks available that will tell you about these routes, different types of route networks. The most common ones are the trunk line with feeders, branches and loops, and the grid network. Radial and ring pattern is also fairly popular across different cities. So, if we look at some of them in detail, so you would see the radial and ring pattern somehow looks like this. So, it has a radial pattern which radiates out of the central business district. Okay. So, all of the different routes radiate out of the central business district into the different suburban areas, but at the same time it is overlaid by a radial network as well. So, why is this usually done? Because now if you want to travel from the central business district on the blue route, and then but your destination is eventually on the green route, you do not want to be there is usually no connection. If there is no radial, if the radial route is not there, there is no connection between the blue route and the green route, except for going all the way into the CBD and then taking a green route again. So, this radial pattern kind of allows you to now transfer between these different types of routes or different types of lines. So, that is the a pattern that is observed in many of these cities. An example here shown is the Moscow city's network. Grid network is something that many of you would also notice in some of the cities that have well planned road networks. Well planned road networks as in road networks that are square or rectangular in pattern. So, if you have such grid patterns, it is very easy to reach your destinations. The block sizes usually are very small. So, once you get off of your bus, your destination is not very far, or your origin is very close to your bus stop at the home end of it. So, these are, however, these are mostly restricted around the CBD areas of most of the cities now. So, the CBD areas tend to have kind of a grid road pattern, and hence the bus routes in the CBD areas also tend to have a very grid pattern of network. Shown here as an example is the Gandhinagar network. Moving ahead, this is something that is becoming is popular worldwide also, but is now catching up in India, especially when there are BRTS corridors, bus rapid transit system corridors. So, an example is the Indore city bus rapid transit corridor. So, the red line that is the trunk line is the trunk or the main line that runs either east west. In this case, it is shown east west, but can run north south as well. So, that is the main route that runs, and then there are different feeder routes to that main or trunk route that feed into this main line. So, here you would see that there are different green, orange, brown lines that are feeding to the trunk line. So, this type of network usually is seen when there is a main BRTS system, and then there are different feeder routes that feed into that system. The next theme to understand is the type of bus stops. So, now we have already looked at what are the different types of buses and what are the different types of bus networks. The next category is bus stops. So, you would think, why do you want to categorize different bus stops? You would want to categorize them based on how many people get on board or get off the bus at different types of stops. So, once you know what if a particular stop has very heavy boarding during the morning times and very heavy deboarding during the evening times, then you would know that that is a very maybe a major residential area where people in the morning are going to work and in the evening are coming back. So, you would have them as regular stops or sometimes priority stops even. So, you would see that the bus stop categories are divided into different categories and generally based on the location where they are. So, the first one are called minimum boarding points, which have very little demand. They are maybe suburban locations which during the daytime has very low demand, but may have a little bit of demand during peak and off peak times. So, those are minimum boarding points, and why you want to classify them, we will get to it a little bit later. Regular stops are regular suburban sites that we discussed just now, has morning peak and evening peaks, and usually very little demand in the midday. Intermediate points are maybe suburban sites near some attraction. So, maybe there is a park and ride lot, or there is some kind of a large shopping center in the suburban area. Those are classified as intermediate stops, whereas finally premium stops are the stops near major attractors big office complexes, big entertainment places, or so on and so forth. Now, after knowing what are the different categories of bus stops, one also has to know where to place these bus stops on the road network. That plays a very important role because these are the locations along the road network where the bus is going to stop to pick up and drop off passengers. So, the location has to be very ideal, otherwise it may not be able to serve the community. At the same time, the location should not cause much delay to the traffic, to the other traffic modes that are plying on the street. So, here is an example of where a bus stop can be placed. If you look at this street network, this is an intersection and it is shown here that the bus stop is on the far side of this intersection. So, if that is the intersection and the bus stop is after the intersection, then it is called a far side bus stop, immediately after passing through an intersection. So, this is called a far side bus stop, whereas a near side bus stop is just the opposite. So, if this is the intersection and if the bus stop is before the intersection, then it is called a near side bus stop. And the third category is a mid block bus stop. So, mid block bus stops is, it is neither close to any of the two intersections, it is neither close to this intersection nor this intersection, it is somewhere in the middle of this block. Now that we have these three different types of bus stop locations, one also has to understand when to locate these bus stops at these three different locations. So, usually you would see that the preferred location of any bus stop is on the far side. So, there are different situations when bus stops are preferred to be placed on the far side, such as any signalized intersection where bus can stop on the travel lane. So, as you would see here in the previous slides, the bus is on the travel lane, stopping on the travel lane. So, there are other traffic that is going on the same lane and the bus is also stopped on the same lane. Other situations are given here. You would very rarely, when somebody would want to place a bus stop in the mid block, would be if the blocks are too long. So, if the distance between successive intersections is too long, then what you would really want to do, ideally want to do, is not have those bus stops at the intersection, but somewhere in the middle of the intersection, so that you are capturing all the possible riders that are in the middle of the block. Otherwise, it may be too long a distance for them to walk from their origin to this intersection. Also, the other last item listed here is the transit center, which is off street, meaning that it should not be on the travel lanes, it should have a different structure associated with it. So, that is where the terminal stations or the transit centers, where there are multimodal transit centers involved, where you change from a bus to maybe a train or some other, or from a urban bus to a regional bus network. So, those are called transit centers, and those are usually have their own structures which are off the street. Now, here is a typical bus stop spacing scenario. So, now you know where the bus stops physically can be located, either far side, near side, or mid block, and now it is important also to know what is the spacing between two bus stops. So, you would see that in the central core area or the CBD, the spacing is usually very less, because there are lot of attraction points and people may want to get up and get off at several locations. So, your bus stops are usually spaced very close to each other when compared to suburban or rural areas, where you can have bus stops very farly spaced from each other, very distantly spaced from each other. Next, we come to the different types of bus stop designs. So, now that you know where they can be located, it is also essential to understand how they have to be designed. So, let us look at the most common type of bus stop design that we have also looked at while looking at the bus stop locations, which is the curbside stop. So, a curbside stop, this is a far side, if you remember, this is a far side bus stop which is after the intersection, and it is also the curb side, meaning it is right next to the curb on the road. So, it does not have any special infrastructure requirement, it just stops right next to the curb and people get on and get off from the bus. Whereas, in certain other situations you may have something called a bus bay. So, here are your regular traffic lanes, but then the bus would get into this special lane which is called the bus bay, and the bus stop is located in this bus bay. So, this is ideally done or required when there is a location that has a large number of boardings and alightings. So, when the bus has to really stop for a or dwell time of the bus is very high, you do not want it to be obstructing other kind of traffic, which it would do if it was on a curbside, if the stop was on a curbside. Now, it has its own special bus bay, and so there is no obstruction to the ongoing traffic. The next one we usually call, it's another variety of the bus bay lane. This is called an open bus bay. So, you would see that actually right after the intersection the bus bay arrives. So, the buses arriving directly gets into the open bus bay. If you look at a typical one, here the buses go past the intersection in the travel lane, and then the bus bay is a little bit later on, whereas an open bus bay, the bus can directly get in to the bus bay. There are different advantages and disadvantages of this, and when they should be designed is all available in the textbook. But first, let us at least look into what are the different types. Then something a design that is called a queue jumper bus bay. So, what happens here is, if there is a dedicated right turn lane here, I mean these are the diagrams are shown here, keeping in mind the western driving conditions, where people drive on the right hand side and they have free right turn lanes. So, in our case it would be left turn lanes. So, if there is a free right turn lane, what usually is allowed is the buses are allowed to take the right turn lane, but jump the queue and go straight. So, otherwise they would be queued up here in the travel lanes and waiting for this queue to be dissipated before they could go ahead. So, in order to avoid them to be queued up on the travel lanes, they are allowed to take this right turn only lane, but jump the queue and come directly into the open bus bay. So, that is the example of a queue jumper bus bay. Similarly, the last one is a nub or a curb extension. What happens here is, usually the curb is supposed to be here, however, it is kind of extended so that the parked vehicles can be on this side, the parking can be on this side, and the bus stop can be here. So, these are pretty well illustrated and easy to understand and explained in your textbook. So, in conclusion, what we looked at today was all the advantages and disadvantages of bus transportation in terms of flexibility, cost and capacity. We introduced you to the different types of buses, the different types of bus stops, the placement of bus stops, as well as the design of bus stops. So, all of these 4 or 5 elements together is going to help you to plan for a bus network in your city and make it more efficient. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to having you in the next lecture.